Right now, we're going to be joined by a dear friend from my home state of Georgia, where I was born and raised, Congressman Doug Collins, who is the vice chairman of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, Alan, it's so good to talk with you. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. And also, I want to bring up you're a chaplain in the United States Army. It's something that I want to say thank you for your service so much, Chaplain.
Well, thank you. Our Army and Air Force brethren, we work well together, and it's always good to be about my colonel, and it's good to talk to you.
You got it. Now, let's talk about the hearing that was just held yesterday in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where you had the members of the National Security Team, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. Were you convinced from their testimony that this is a prudent venture? Did they make the case for you?
No, didn't even come close. And it's very concerning. And you served, and you know what those hearings are like. And what I walked into, and I made the comment toward the end of my questioning time. And I said, look, I came into this hearing with a lot of questions. I said, unfortunately, I'm leaving here with more questions. Mm-hmm. And really, it was just a disturbing to listen to what was being said, and really what was not being said. There was no plan for what would happen in the future. There was no plans for what happened. As you well know, and you have done many times, you got to have contingency plans. What happens if? Now, in fairness, General Dempsey, in a setting like that, I would not expect him to give operational issues, but you could just sort of tell that there was just a concern that it was going to work, and we'll just deal with it later. So it's just really a concerning part for me.
Now, I want to play you a clip from Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia and John Kerry yesterday. Can we play clip number 2, please?
Mr. Secretary, let me ask one question. If we do nothing, and Mr. Secretary Hagel asked, I invite you to answer as well, keeping in mind we have a limited amount of time. If we do nothing, what is the likelihood in your judgment that Bashar al-Assad will use chemical weapons as a routine weapon to turn the tide of this civil war?
I think the likelihood is very high that he would use them again.
Mr. Secretary.
Well, I agree completely. I might even put it at 100%. And you should go check the intel on it. I think you'll be convinced, but I'd say probably 100%.
Now, Congressman Collins, I was an artilleryman, and I can tell you that there are many different ways to dispense chemical weapons. Now, do you feel with a 100% guarantee that if we do conduct a strike, Assad will not use again, or even worse, if the opposition, the al-Qaeda-leaning opposition gets these chemical weapons in their hands, that they may not use those weapons?
Well, I think that was the flip question that was not really addressed, but it was very pertinent, and I think that's the question that you get from General Dempsey. And because, in fact, I even went back on this. General Dempsey actually said, we will not get all the chemical weapons, even with the response that we're looking at, which now leaves. And then one of the things, I'm going to take it a step further. You've just hit on it, but Alan, this is the problem that I'm having in this. They keep saying, and this is the administration, they keep saying we're not wanting to involve ourselves in a civil war and pick sides. But yet the Senate yesterday, by the way, put in language that said exactly that. They said they wanted to turn the tide of the battlefield, in my words, so that there was a negotiated peace, although no boots on the ground. My concern is, though, is if you have two people or two groups that are fighting and you damage one and you do nothing to the other, then you are putting yourself in the middle of a civil war. You are influencing, so to speak, the tipping of the scale. And at that point in time, what are we going to do exactly like you said, to make sure without putting assets on the ground, to make sure that those chemical weapons that are there are not falling into the wrong hands and could be used by those groups all over the world, not just in Syria.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Congressman Doug Collins, who's the vice chairman of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he was there at the hearing yesterday when the National Security Team was before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The thing is that it's just not two different groups. It is more than two different groups. I mean, you have Assad, then you have the Free Syrian Army, And then you have a plethora of radical Islamic groups, Jabhat al-Nusra, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and several other second and third lower players as well. So, if we're talking about degrading Assad's capability and upgrading, the opposition capability, which opposition? Do you feel the Secretary of State Kerry understands who the opposition really is?
Well, I think that's the problem that we're seeing right now. This goes back to something that you have talked about and you and I have mentioned many times. This goes back to leadership. Mm-hmm. This goes back to leadership in the world. And for many people, if they're just sort of waking up to this situation and just maybe over the last few weeks, they got to understand that this situation started, roughly 2 years ago when the president himself said Assad must go and then basically went off on another trip. He just basically left it to hang, although many in Congress, and I believe including yourself and others, said this is a situation that is going to turn dire for many of our allies that we're going to have to face, but they chose to ignore it. What disturbed me more yesterday is not only these other groups, which we're not sure who or where they would actually be hurting or helping in this situation, because there are many groups, as was said yesterday, bad and good. But the situation is what are we going to do in regard to a strike that hinders the ability of one and puts us in the middle of something in which we've not looked long term. This is just something that's got to be addressed, and it's not being addressed. It goes back to leadership, and leadership is lacking right now, and I believe we saw that on display yesterday.
It's interesting you talked about leadership, because that was kind of the tone of my opening monologue, and that leadership takes responsibility. Leadership is accountable. How did you feel when you heard the president yesterday at the press conference in Sweden, when he basically said that it's not his credibility, it's Congress's credibility, and that he did not draw a red line? Did you take that as a little bit of a slap in the face?
I took it not as a slap in the face. I took it as an embarrassment, in all fairness. It was just it was one of those things where I sort of look at my kids when they come and tell me something like, they're sitting there holding whatever they broke, and they said, I didn't do it. Excuse me, Mr. President. Look, at least take ownership for what you said. And here I'm going to take it a step further. Not only did he say there was a red line, only thing we're hearing now is the press is reporting a red line on the use of. Go back and listen to what the president originally said. He said, if they start moving those chemicals around or using them, that's a red line that will change. And here it is, my calculations of how to deal with Syria. Mr. President, my is a personal pronoun. It is not a world involvement. So I have a problem right there altogether.
Now, let's shift a little bit away from Syria, because you're on a subcommittee that also looks at North Africa. And, yep. Congressman, I believe that you cannot talk about Syria without talking about Libya, and especially talking about what happened in Benghazi. And here we go again, a president who went into Libya without congressional approval that time. And look at the unintended consequences that we got from going into Libya. We destabilized the country to the point where we're going to be remembering and memorializing, 4 Americans who lost their lives. Of course, no one has been held accountable for that. But also now we have a place in Libya where Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood are training fighters to go to Syria. So, do you think that anyone has an understanding of these unintended consequences, these second and third order effects in this administration?
I'm beginning to wonder. I know our military does. I know that the folks who are actually looking at it and having to know and having to sort of scout plans on what we're going to have to do just in case, they're provided. But I think the political leadership of this administration believes that they can somehow ignore it and it'll get better, or just make a great speech and everybody will forget. This is the epitome of what I'll call speech writing diplomacy, or the speech writing foreign policy. Let's give a great speech. Everybody gets hyped up. That's our foreign policy. You know as well as I do, foreign policy must not only have rhetoric, but it has action. And we've not provided that. We've not provided very good rhetoric, and we've not provided action that others around the world could see. What frustrates me right now, whether it be Libya, Egypt, Syria, do you see an effect going on right here? That we've not provided leadership. And so now, when it comes to the fact of Syria using chemical weapons, and have used them many times before, by the way, not just in the last 2 weeks, but we're not standing up to 2 of the protectorate of Syria. Where is the president's condemnation of Russia? Where is the president's condemnation of China? Where is it that we are the superpower of the world, and yet we're sort of slinking along here, not making a stand, and saying, "Well, we're just being forced along at this point." That's not leadership.
Yeah,
we've got to have leadership.
As a matter of fact, Congressman, we just had President Putin call the Secretary of State of the United States of America a liar, and who would have ever thought? You know, I got a couple of minutes left. I want to play a clip for you and get your reaction as far as what's going to happen next Monday when the the House GOP conference comes back. Let me play a clip for you.
This is something that the United States as a country needs to do. I'm going to support the President's call for action. I believe that my colleagues should support this call for action. We have enemies around the world that need to understand that we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior. We also have allies around the world and allies in the region who also need to know that America will be there and stand up when it's necessary.
Congressman, I know what it's like in that House GOP conference. What do you think is going to happen next Monday when you guys all come back? I guess you'll have your first conference on Tuesday, but that's the Speaker of the House going out there. And, you know, he does not want to be a lonely man on a walk. I do not think that this is set up to pass in the House. What's your assessment?
Right now, it's going to be very difficult, and that's just in private conversations. I think that it's very much split in the Republican conference. I think it's very much split in the Democratic conference. What is concerning is and again, I respect this is a matter really of conscience and district, and I respect the Speaker for his opinion and what he wants to see accomplished here. But I think when you look at the overall picture, simply acting now, in which chemical warfare, I think you and I both would agree, is abhorrent, but also is killing an ambassador is abhorrent as well, and also outside the norm of warfare. You know, when we deal with this, why have we not been having this kind of a discussion all along? I respect the Speaker's opinion, but I think he's going to find that there is a House that is deeply skeptical of involving ourselves, especially when Secretary Kerry, who stumbled on several occasions when asked to say how many people are going to be supporting us for this, and then when asked about support, it was, yes, we think the United States ought to take action here, and by the way, we'll stand over here on the sidelines and clap. That's the problem, and I know some of them will want to do more, but right now, this is not a coalition. And when the French is the main part of your coalition, we've got a problem.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Congressman Doug Collins from Georgia Congressional District 9. He's the vice chairman on the North Africa and the Middle East Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thanks so much, Doug. Good luck to you.
Carl, take care.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Alan West, guest hosting the Steve Malzberg Show. You can call us toll-free 1-855-777-9660. When we come back from the break, we're going to be taking your calls. I know we got a couple of folks that are standing by, and one of those gentlemen seems to be from down there in Roll Tide country. This is Alan West on the Steve Malzberg Show. We'll see you on the back.